Hi everybody, I am Zehra and today we are going to talk about the second chapter of the linguistic structure of modern English. Let's get started. Firstly, we are going to start with the spoken versus the writing form of English. Most of the time we equate speaking with writing, but there are significant differences between them. Speech were invented before writing, and some language systems have no writing form, but all languages have spoken form. Furthermore, some languages have more than one writing system, and even very related languages may use very different writing systems. And when it comes to English spelling, it's a sequence of letters composing a word, or can describe as the forming of words from letters according to exact usage orthography. There are some descriptions. The first is one sound can be represented by variety of graphemes, for example, meat and people, and one grapheme can be represented a variety of sounds, as we see in this example, picked, educate, and damage, and some grapheme may represent no sound at all, me and no. Two or more grapheme can represent a single sound, chain and edge. Two or more grapheme can be represented as single sound, as in box, and some sounds have no graphic representation, and we need a system of recording sound in which a single writing symbol represents one and only one speech sound, and in which a single sound is represented by one and only one writing symbol. For the reason, the International Phonetic Alphabet was invented in 1888. And it's important to keep in mind that each medium of language fulfills different functions and has certain advantages. On one hand, the oral medium expresses certain meaning features that cannot always be recorded in the writing medium. For example, emphasize, indicated by syllables phrased in speech and very inexactly by underlining in writing, as in I want that one, not this one. And sentence type, indicated by intonation, the rising and falling contours of the voice. And paralanguage, the tones of voice and vocal qualifiers indicated by shouting, rolling, whispering, twirling, and so on. And finally, kinesis, indicated by body movement, facial expression, and gestures. On the other hand, there are aspects of language which writing expresses, but speech cannot. For example, historical changes, older pronunciations preserved in spelling, such as home, net, or south, and words indicated by spaces, sometimes disambiguating and ambiguous phonological sequences such as syntax, or homemade, home-aid, and homophones, words which are pronounced the same but spelled differently, such as beer, bear, meat, meat, or made, made. And finally, permanency, permanent the keeping of historical annals, the recording laws, and the writing of other permanent records. And when we come to the production of speech sound, most of languages, including English, use the aggressive pulmonic system to create speech sound. The first term, which is aggressive, refers to the sound is produced when air is exciting, not entering the lungs. And pulmonic refers to the use of lungs as the power of sound. The air travels up bronchial tubes to the trachea or throughout the larynx. The larynx contains a valve which functions to close off the trachea while you are eating. This valve has been adapted for the purpose of speech. It is known as vocal cords. The vocal cords are two muscles stretching horizontally across the larynx. The vocal cords are open during normal breathing, but closed during eating. The space between the cords when they are open is known as the glottis. Air continues past larynx into the pharynx, whose only real function is a connector and resonator. The air then moves into the vocal tract consisting of the oral and nasal cavities. The oral cavity is the mouth is a resonator and generator of speech sound via articulator which may be moving or passive. And active articulators include the tongue divided into the front, back, and the root. The tongue modifies the shape of cavity as a valve by touching part of mouth to stop the flow of air and is shaped in various ways to direct the flow of air. And the lower lip. The lip may be placed against the upper teeth or together with the upper lip, may be closed or opened, rounded or spread. And the passive articulators include the teeth, both upper and lower, the roof of mouth, which is divided into alveolar ridge, which is 1 centimeter behind the upper teeth, the hard palate, which is the domed bony plate, the soft palate or velum, which is the muscular flap at the rear, and the uvula, which is the tip of the velum, and the pharynx or back of the throat, which is used by some languages in producing speech but not on English. And when it comes to consonant sounds, a consonant is defined as a speech sound which is articulated with some kind of stricture or closure of the air stream. And consonants are classified according to four features: the state of glottis in vibration or open, the state of velum, lowered or raised, the place of articulation, the location where the stricture or place of maximum interference occurs, and what articulators are involved, and the manner of articulation, the amount of stricture, whether it's complete, partial, or relatively open. And let's start with place of articulation. If we start with bilabial, the lips are brought together, the tongue is not involved but remains in the rest position, the sound of B in English. Labiodental, the lower lip is brought up against the upper front teeth, against the tongue is in the rest position, the sound of F in English. And dental, the tip of tongue protrudes between the teeth or touches the back of the upper teeth, the sound of T in English, for example, throughout. Alveolar, the tip of tongue makes contact with or is in close approximation to the alveolar ridge, the sound of D in English. And alveolopalatal, the front or blade of the tongue is raised to an area between the alveolar ridge and the palate, the sound of SH in English. And palatal, the front of tongue is brought up against the palate, the sound of way in English. And velar, the back of the tongue is brought into contact with the velum, the sound of G in English. And glottal, the vocal cords functioning as articulator, make a brief closure. And when it comes to the manner of articulation, first one is stop, involving complete closure of two articulators with the velum raised, the sound of P in English. At nasal, involving complete closure of two articulators with the velum lowered, the sound of N in English. And fricative, involving close approximation of two articulators, the airstream is partially obstructed so that a turbulent airflow is produced, resulting in a hissing or rubbing sound, the sound of S in English. And affricate, consisting of a stop release into a homologous fricative, the sound of CH in English. This sound is analyzed either as a complex or simple sound. And trill, involving complete closure in alternating intermittently with an open approximation, that is a rapid vibration of the active articulator against the passive articulator. And flap, involving momentary complete closure in which the active articulator strikes the passive articulator only once. It is one streak of a trill and similar to stop, except that the tongue is more tense and controlled than in stop. And approximate, one articulator approach another, but generally not to extent that a turbulent airstream is produced. There is usually often approximation in three different types of approximations. To adequately define a vowel, we need to look at in the articularity, acoustic, and functional terms. In articulatory terms, vowels are sound articulated with no obstruction of the airstream, that is, with open articulation. In acoustic terms, vowels are sounds that vary in pitch, which is determined by the quality of sound wave. And in functional terms, vowels constitute the nucleus or necessary part of the syllable. When we come to classification of vowels, although there are fewer vowels than consonants, their classification is more difficult for the following reasons. Vowels are articulated not by putting the articulator into discrete configurations, but shaping the tongue in mouth. And the other reason is there is a significant regional and individual variation in the inventory of vowel sound, and the authorities differ in their analysis of vowel sound and in their method of transcription vowels. And we can produce acceptable vowel sound without the full complement of articularity, gesture, for example, with our teeth clenched or without the required lip rounding, differences in length combined with differences in quality in distinguished vowels. But it's not always easy to separate these differences. And there are two kinds of vowels. The first is monophthong, is a single or simple vowel sound constituting the nucleus of syllable. The position of tongue is more or less static, and there is a relatively consonant acoustic property or pitch to the sound. And a diphthong consists of the tongue leading from one vowel position to another within a single syllable. It is produced as one continuous sound, not as a succession of sound. By definition, a diphthong involves a change in the position of tongue, and it may involve a change in the shape of lips as well. And vowel of English and their phonetic notation. The front vowels are produced with the high point of the tongue in the palatal region. The front vowels of modern English are all unrounded. In the high front area, there are two vowels. The first one is the high front tense vowel represented with a Roman alphabet lowercase I. This is the long E sound of words such as heat, he, heat, and heat. The high front lax vowel represented with a Roman alphabet small capital. This is the vowel in words such as a beat, heat, and key. And the lower mid front vowel represented with Greek epsilon. This is the sound in head, bed, neck, bed, hair, care. It's a very common vowel in English. And in the low front area, there is a one vowel in English. The low front vowel represented by the old English symbol called ash. It is a sound in words such as lamp, head, rub, fast, and trump. To sum up, it's important when distinguishing consonant and vowels to consider both differences in form. As we have seen, neither vowels or consonants are entirely distinguished by either form or function, since some consonants are articulated as vowels with open approximation and some consonants function as vowels in certain environments. Thank you for listening.